Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I have one item that's not on the agenda. Received notification from the election committee that Nancy Bunting has withdrawn her name as for the director's election. Next item, the approval of the minutes, January 23rd, regular meeting.
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, unanimous?
No, just announce your proxy that you are holding the proxy for Ruth Hatcher.
Okay, I have the proxy for Ruth Hatcher, who was unable to be here tonight. Second, February 20 board work session.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? 9-0. Reports from the Joint Advisory Committee. Lakes is up first. Is there a representative here? Matt Champagne.
Good evening, y'all. As most of you may or may not know, most of our time was spent for the past year and a half discussing the wake boat issue, and my understanding is the board will vote on that tonight. We appreciate your consideration of that. As I've said before, we've tried to make recommendations that were actionable, enforceable, and legal, and all of our recommendations were vetted by both POA Legal and Rick's group to make sure that we were doing things that could be acted upon. In other news, the drawdown on Lake Ann has become a problem because of the frequent rains that we've had recently. According to Rick, it's down about 50 inches, but now looks like dredging may be impossible because of future rains. So we'll have to see how that goes to see if we can continue to get the thing down if we don't have rain. In addition to that, there was a motion made to support a kayak demo days, the kids catfishing derby, and the Fly Tire Club grade school kids fishing derby. And that motion was seconded and passed. In addition to that, we had someone on the committee recommend that lakes, since they are a big part of the activities that take place in Bella Vista, be given their fair share of resources and dollars moving forward. And activities include swimming, fishing, boating, and our community continues to grow, and we feel that lakes will be an ongoing recreational activity for years to come. Unless there are any questions, that's my update.
Thank you, Matt. Next on the agenda, the Recreation Committee. Gary?
Yeah. All right, I'm Gary Griffin, I'm the chair of the Recreation Committee, and we had our meeting on February 10th, 2020 for the Recreation Committee. We had a guest, which was great, which was John Hudek, which is a POA board candidate. Glad to see him come out. I would ask any other board candidates to come join our session in March or April so you can have a greater understanding of what we do as a committee. The committee reports, I'll be brief on those. Branchwood swimming pool is up and running. It had got a makeover. Lake Ann, the water level has been up and down. That's one of the things that we discussed as well. But, you know, it's the weather and you can't do much about it. Towery Park, as usual, is in good shape. does get used a lot during the winter. And Reardon, a couple of things happened there. There's some new treadmills being in place soon, and no concerns with the tennis courts. And there is a spring bazaar on April 18th. As it relates to Loch Lomond Park, it's looking a lot better. It's great. About 15 kids were out there playing softball the last time that Jan was out there. And there's lots of walkers on the trails too, thanks to the good weather that we had. Gun range, I went out there and it looks like it's going to be one of the best months that we had ever, just based on the amount of classes that we had. And there's people out there that decided that it didn't matter how cold it was or raining it was, they still wanted to go to it. So, Glowing Springs, we didn't have a report because we had somebody out who was ill. Canyon Creek, once again, many people out there. Lake Avalon, the beach area is still closed. There's a couple of things going on with the new bridge that they put in, but that was just some minor maintenance things. As far as Met Field's in good condition, and there was about 24 members that got using the amenities, and Chris did his report. And then Parks in good shape. New business, March 7th is the next meet and greet. As of the time that we had our meeting, there was 24 people already signed up. So I'm not quite sure how big that's going to be, but I think it'll be attended quite well as usual. We talked about some of the capital projects and got some information relative to the fact that those are all tabled, and we might revisit them again at some point. That was archery, that was pickleball courts, and it was a dog park. We had a conversation about silver sneakers and silver fit, just to make sure everybody was clear and understood that. And Joan did a great job of giving us information on that. And we received a historic site request from the Bella Vista Country Club. We went and we were looking to put the country club as an historical site. And that's moving through the process, it looks like. And that came from Judy from the marketing department. And I think in August we will have another visit, and it may very well end up on the historical.
It goes to the board in August,
Okay.
and they would vote on it at that time. Keep in mind that the Country Club was designed by E. Jones, who founded the University of Arkansas School of Architecture. So,
And our next meeting is 4 p.m. Monday, March 9th. So anybody who would like to come join us, we'd most appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Next up is golf. Jason?
Jason Lloyd, Chair of the Golf Committee. Our February 12th recap, real quick. Golf revenue was down last year, total year. Really not a bad year, considering all the days we were closed due to the flooding. But we were down 153 on 19. Golf rounds were off about 6,200. Again, the weather last year. We had 90 inches of rain, as we talked about, at Highlands last year, and the normal's a little over 40. So a lot of days off. Great news that January's rounds were up 213. Had great weather, and let's just continue to pray for good weather through the spring. And it's also a national trend that's seeing golf rounds increase in 2020 already. We had visitors also, as Gary mentioned. John was at our this month's meeting. Janice has been, Sims has been at one of our meetings, and we asked the other candidates to join us. Charlie Teal was there from the Bella Vista Foundation to discuss the 2020 Cooper Community Charity Classic. That's a tongue twister. That's going to be at the Country Club in June. This is the APT Tour event that we've hosted the last few years. Last year, the foundation gave $30,000 in grants excuse me, to 5 local charities: Boys and Girls Club of Benton County, Bella Vista Courtesy Van, Bella Vista Animal Shelter, the Bella Vista Sunshine Rotary, and the Village House received grants. If you would like to get involved in that event, please contact Charlie. As recently published, the 9 holes known as Birksdale North will be reopening in the spring. We're targeting 1st of April, barring any more flooding. Hopefully we won't get it this year. And there will be some rerouting due to the bridge removal, and there will be an adjusted tee time format. So look to the website and weekly golf update for more information on that. A couple more things real quick. As mentioned last month, we've adjusted our meeting format a little bit, and last month's main topic was ideas to continue to increase rounds. There were some great ideas that were discussed, and we're looking forward to implementing and continue to promote golf in Villa Vista. That's that time of year that we're looking for, as all committees are looking for members. So if anybody wants to join the golf committee, we encourage you to go to the website, fill out the application, and we'll go through that whole process, and all the other committees will be looking for people also. Note for dates, March 10th is the Golf Expo here at Reardon, Golf Fest, April 11th at Tanyard, and our next meeting is March 11th at 8:30. Yes, sir.
Will the APT tournament be a McClarty Daniel tournament this year, or is Cooper bowed out?
I'm not sure on that.
I think
I
Charlie
don't know
mentioned
if
that.
Charlie's here or not.
Yeah,
Didn't see him.
he mentioned that in a meeting that he had a meeting with Cooper, and perhaps McClarty Daniel has stepped up to the plate
Oh, excellent.
this year. So
Good. That must
anyway, we've got a title
must have just
sponsor.
happened. So good. That's good. Yeah, they're looking at raising a lot, like 40,000, I think, this year for foundations. So they're going to pick 5 more foundations in Bella Vista. So, anything else?
Thank you, Jason. Next up, Community Involvement Committee. Nothing from them? Okay. Next item, financial reports.
All right, we weren't sure how many people were going to attend today's meeting. We made 50 copies. It looks like we still have some more, but if anybody is watching, live streaming, they can contact Tammy at this email address, and she'll send you the entire 170-page packet of today's meeting. We're going to briefly go over the financials because it is January, and it's the first month of the year. So we're going to start with the POA. You'll see that our gross profit is down a little bit. While assessments are up, golf is down. What we think is occurring is a lot of our golfers are delaying getting their membership until March 1 when the new fee schedule kicks in. So while Jason from the golf committee referenced our rounds are up, which is great, but our memberships are down, but it's a delay for right now. On the expense side, you'll see that we're doing fairly well. The salaries are across all divisions. That's a $71,000 savings. Some support contracts, repairs and maintenance, and professional fees. So the team is doing a good job in conserving expenses. And you'll see that the EBITDA for January, and it's just the first month of the year, is $56,000 to the positive. And then on to the water utility. You'll see that our revenue is actually up by $56,000, and that's water usage, mainly additional homes. As the community adds homes, there's more users. Expenses, they were just a little bit over expenses compared to budget, mainly the annual software budget. So the EBITDA was better by $28,000, so it's a nice way to start the year where both the POA and the water department are better than budget. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a motion. And after many meetings that we've had regarding the necessity to do a revised budget this year, based on some things we found out in December and January and November, namely bridges at golf courses, it affected the fail budget, and then also the pass budget was approved January 16th, and so because of that, I would move that we approve the 2000 revised operating capital and simple cash flow budgets, replacing the fail budget that we had implemented for all of this year, which were approved in November.
Jim, if that's later on in the agenda,
to approve the revised, and I have a presentation. You were at last week's meeting.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we're going to be using the exact same presentation since we have a lot of people that haven't seen that.
Okay, well, I'll make the motion then.
Fantastic.
Next item listed on the program, you'll see that open forum comments and questions that came in. I want to assure you that we do take comments and questions seriously, and we do consider what our property owners say. Next item will be the open forum. The first, I have John Kennett. Please just state the street that you live on.
3 Wentworth. Right. I'm just here on regards to bicycling issues. And I ride a bike. That's one of the reasons my wife and I moved over here. Thank you. And it's a good thing. It's good physical activity. Ask a doctor. Low impact. And I get out there and I clean the trails as well. And to me, that's just almost as much fun as riding a bike or taking a hike. And I've done some of that this year. I got to get out and do some more. But my gist is that it's a good activity to bike. And you got somebody with the Walton Foundation, I believe, that's putting up the majority of the money that is required to make the trails. And that's great. I mean, geez, can't beat that. But that's basically all I got to say on that. Well, one other thing on a personal level, I started biking about 13 years ago, and but I was a smoker, and the two don't go well together. And I asked the doctor about that, and he says, hopefully he could tell me something I'd like to hear. But he gave me a card, it's SOS, Stamp Out Smoking. Yeah, it took me a while, like about a year, but I like to ride a bike. And my lungs they're just average lungs. I was lucky not to get any complications, so it was enough motivation for me to stop smoking. So I haven't been smoking for 13 years. And one of the reasons, the primary reason, is probably the biking. It made me healthier. About it.
Thank you. Congratulations on being a non-smoker. I myself am a former smoker, so I understand what's involved. And thank you for your efforts to keep the trails clean. Thank you very much. Next up is Jan Myers.
Hi, good evening. My name's Jan Marie Myers,
your street.
71 Merritt Drive.
Thank you.
I just wanted to talk a little bit. I have always been for the walkway that we had talked about. I believe it was last spring for the connector between Blowing Springs and the Metfield Park. And I really, my only greatest concern about it was the privacy and the preservation of the trees behind our property. The walkway along with the soft rail run directly behind our property, and the trees I'm speaking about act as a natural privacy curtain and noise barrier from the traffic off of Houston Road. I understand and I love the trails, but the idea of a walk path, which I have been for, but a 10-foot wide concrete walkway is an entirely different animal. And I just wanted to see how many trees will be lost in the construction of this. And I know there's a great deal of unknowns of what's going to happen, but a lot of the residences on Merritt Drive, Murrow Lane, and Merritt Circle will directly be impacted by this project. And we just feel that with all due consideration, since the initial meeting of the input, that this will affect all the residents of the streets I mentioned. And it's personal to us because it involves our property with my family, and it encroaches encroaches, excuse me, on our privacy directly. And we just want to see, so I would like to meet with you as well to see, and I understand that maybe after the construction you would put up more plants and shrubs, and we appreciate that greatly. The one reason I moved here is all the pine trees that line most of the roads. They're along Houston, and I would hate to lose those because those take years to grow back up, and they do act as a natural curtain for the noise and our privacy. So I would like you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Jan? Sorry.
I think you will get an answer to some of your concerns at the end. We do have an answer for that. Good news. Next one up is Mike, and I apologize, I can't read the rest. This is the time right now.
Ken Tate said he wasn't going to be here, so I thought I'd talk just a little bit about pickleball. We have 92 people in the pickleball email group right now. We have a ladder tourney starting up in March with 24 ladies that are signed up. Normally we play outside Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Most people don't play on Saturday or on Thursday right now. They have ordered new nets, thanks to Joan. I talked to her, and she said that they would order new nets for that, but the courts need to be resurfaced, and she said that she'd be paying attention to that, but I want to make sure that that gets on the agenda. Currently inside, most of our people play almost every week. If it's outside, we play, we'll play over at Medfield. But if it has to be above about 45 degrees for most people want to get out there and play. It's not like golfers will they'll play anytime the sun's shining, because I'm one of those guys too. But we play a lot in Rogers. We play at the Adult Wellness Center where they've got 3 courts. We play on 3 courts at the RAC, which is at Rogers Activity Center. And then the Boys and Girls Club here in Bella Vista, there's a lot of people who play over there. So again, just wanted to address the court surface. I know that we've tabled any new courts and all that stuff for this year, and I certainly understand budgeting concerns, but wanted to lay that out there for the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more scheduled. Brent, I'm sorry, Steinspring? Got one right.
Hello, I'm Brent Steinspring. I live on Blakeney Lane, and I sent you all an email expressing my sentiments and rationale for why I support the Metfield connector, and I'd just like to reiterate some of those points. It really falls down, I think, to 3 essential elements. Number 1, topography. Number 2, connectivity. And number 3, usability. And topography, I think, seems pretty straightforward. There aren't a lot of areas in Bella Vista that are flat and suitable for a solid surface trail such as this. For connectivity, obviously, it connects 2 very desirable parks that we have in Bella Vista. But it doesn't just stop there, because obviously it connects to the Greenway, which opens up many more miles of trail to go much further. And then the last piece is the usability, that obviously there's a lot of people that don't want just one type of trail to use, and we have a lot of people that I think would benefit from a trail that is open to everybody that would possibly want to get out on a trail, period. So we think it would be a great service to the membership to provide a trail such as this that connects Blowing Springs up to Metfield. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hopefully hearing a big yes vote later on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else at this time?
I'm Roger Scholes, 19 Dalton Drive. I was glad to see and hear that you're going to open Birksdale in April, but I'm concerned about the statement of mini maintenance. I believe that Birksdale is maintained like the other golf courses. They'll generate 4 to 5 times the revenue that Brittany would generate. So that's just a negative to the golfers if we're going to do that. You know, now with the assessment increase, maybe now is the time to think outside the box a little bit. You know, Birksdale actually could be a very good 12-hole golf course, just the way it is now. You go through 6, go across the bridge where the restroom is, play the par 5 down, the par 4 back, and the par 3, and come back across the bridge, play the barn hole, 10, 11, and 12. It'd be a perfect 12-hole golf course. Nicholas has been talking about that for years. They built a 13-hole golf course over in Branson. This would be a great 12-hole golf course. You'd have 4 par 3s, 4 par 4s, and 4 par 5s. Wouldn't be any better than that. I'm just saying something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
My name is Bill Ginger. I live at 42 Dunkhill Drive, which is over on Loch Lomond. I live on, I call it Tyree Raceway. And I want to object a little bit on the paragraph here where it has operation of watercraft at a speed exceeding 5 miles per hour is prohibited within 100 foot of a structure or shoreline. I've attended a lot of meetings with the lake people, and I would like to see that pushed out to 200 foot, which is the same rules as the wake boat, and also for the property owners in the main body of the lake. They're afforded the luxury accommodations, whatever, that pleasure boats, whether they're going full speed and or pulling tubing or skiers, they're still 200 feet away from any dock. But primarily, it's a safety issue with me and other property owners. If we have family, friends, children, kayaking, paddleboarding off of our dock, 100 foot is not very far away. And technically, the way this is reading, any kind of a boat can go full speed on Tyree Channel as long as they're 101 feet away. I would like to see that be 200 foot. I don't see why it can't be. Our channel is actually somewhat same or narrower than the 2 other channels that afforded that accommodation, Stony Kirk and Granton Park. They have no wake buoys there. This would still allow the fishermen to use the center part of the channel to go full speed, but it at least give a safer buffer zone for the property owners on Tyree Channel, is to push it out to 200 foot, which is what y'all have passed the first reading, I noticed, as far as wake boats and other boats. There's no skiing or tubing on that channel, but yet they can still go full speed. And reiterating, they can go full speed within 101 feet of anybody that wants to be out there kayaking, and that throws a pretty good wake. And if you're by a structure, that can be dangerous. So I'd like for y'all to take a reconsideration on the 100-foot limit and push it out to 200 foot. Thank you.
Any more? Okay. Open forum is closed.
On a couple of those items, I'd like to address those. In the past, we used to wait until the following month to provide our property owners with answers to their questions. While some of them we can't respond to because in some cases we have to do additional research, but we do want to, we've started since last month trying where we address select ones that we know that we can answer immediately. So regarding the Blowing Springs connector, you know, I know that in some cases where trees are going to be removed, I encourage you, to wait until after It's been installed. If you still are concerned about not having enough trees in that area, contact me directly. I will put you in touch with the right people. They've been very good about installing trees and hedges and so forth to ensure that people have privacy. Also, in the back of the room here, on that square table by the one entrance, is the entire plan on paper. It's about 40 plus pages long. It's not the easiest thing to go through, but you're welcome to go take a look at that and see where it goes along the trail. Regarding pickleballs, pickleball courts, that was a very challenging discussion for the board. They really wanted to do more pickleball courts. They wanted to do more repairs to pickleball courts, and that was a really tough one that they had to cut. And I'm going to use the words of one of our board members when they said that the pickleball courts and the dog park and the archery would be potentially the first alternates that that the board would consider if we have a good year and it's looking strong. They would be the first alternate. So they fully recognize the importance of those projects. Unfortunately, they had to make some budgetary changes. Regarding the minimally maintain at Burksdale, I know this is that Keith Eames, who is our golf course superintendent, is just awesome. He does a fantastic job. So while we're going to maintain those courses, that course at a lower level, I have a feeling you're not going to notice it because he's really that good, and he's going to do his best to make sure that it lives up to our standards. So I'm very optimistic. And then the last thing regarding the regulations, the lake regulations that the board is considering tonight. I know that the board is still looking to talk about that. I've had conversations with 2 or 3 board members today alone, and they've had divergent opinions on it. So it's still a very talked about and debated issue. But I can assure you this, is regardless of where the board lands, the Lakes Committee has committed to that this is not the end. This is one step in the process, and they're going to continue to review this. If the regulation that is being presented today, if it goes through, they've committed that they're going to continue to review it on a regular basis to see if further changes need to be made. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that if it's voted in today, everything ends. And that was it.
Okay, I have one item that did take some additional research. We had an item that came up in several meetings. It had to do with a member making the assertion that in our efforts to sell our inventory of POA-owned lots, we had inadvertently caused a loss of real estate taxes to the city by lowering the appraised value of all unimproved lots. At the time I responded, I didn't believe that to be the case, but I did some further research. I sat down with the assessor. He explained the process to me. In a recurring cycle, all areas of the county are routinely reappraised. Bella Vista is scheduled for 2021. At that time, his appraisers will consider all sales during the previous 12 months. Sales considered to be out of the ordinary normal course of business, that is like if you sold your house to your son for $5, those will not be included. Our sale of 348 lots in 4 days will be excluded by both parameters and therefore will not affect real estate taxes for the city of Bella Vista. At this time, he told me that all unimproved lots in Bella Vista are appraised at a minimum of $3,000. Now, after the reappraisal, notices are mailed to the property owners, and then there is a window of opportunity for appeal if you disagree with what they've come up with. So, in the fact that we've been selling these lots, in the past 12 months, we have sold about 340 lots from our inventory, resulting in an increase of about $10,000 a month in monthly assessment income to us. So I think that's a win for everybody. We got them out of our inventory, and we've got people who wanted to own those lots. So that was my response to that. I hope that...
David, I think you said 340, we've actually sold 640.
Did I say 340? 640. 640. So, okay. Next, the revised budget.
Hello? There we go. Oh, okay. And you turned off the slide presentation. And we'll get the slide presentation and then lose the microphone. All right. The goals. First of all, we were revising the 2020 budget. So right now, until Jim makes his motion, right now the budget that is in place is the failed budget, okay? But with the passage of the assessment increase, we need to revise the budget. So that's what we're working on. Also, as we've mentioned specifically in regards to the pickleball courts, this is a very lean budget. And then finally, on the 2020 plan brochure, we had a number of financial commitments that were made to the membership. And so we needed to make sure that every single one of those commitments was accounted for in the budget. All right, so the revised budget, the starting place was we had 2 months of the failed budget and then 10 months of the past budget, okay? Keep in mind that these budgets were originally written in October, so a lot has occurred. We've learned a lot since October. So we tried to use as much updated information as possible, and then we wanted to make sure the budget was lean. Okay, so a couple things, a couple significant changes. Now, first of all, the assessment increase doesn't start till March. With those 2 months, the assessment increase, that's a loss of $364,000. Maybe not a loss, or just we are not going to get the $364,000. Also, the West Side Stump Dump. We now have more information regarding how we're going to close that, and we have to close it in following ADEQ standards. That's going to cost us $187,000. The Burksdale Bridge removal, $65,000. One change that's for a positive is that our salaried employees will not be eligible for an increase this year. That's a savings of $48,000. And then Burksdale Bridge is going to be minimally maintained, and we talked about that earlier, and that's going to save us $49,000. All right, so we had to go through the projects. Now, another thing is we have to fix the Scottsdale Bridge. That was not in the original budget. So that's $151,000. And then we had a pump at Burksdale dying us, nice and convenient, $17,000. So that resulted in the board having to really make some very challenging and hard decisions, and they had to make some cuts. So the pickleball courts were one, the archery range, rental boats, and so forth, and the small dog park. Those were hard decisions to make. We know that the small dog park is very popular. We know that pickleball is a very popular and is a growing sport, and to cut those was a very challenging decision. All right, let's get to the financial commitment. So here's the first financial commitment. $6 of the increase will go towards the elimination or reduction of current fees. So $6 is $840,000. Now, where did we get that? Approximately $14,000 in pre-approved homes are in good standing. Okay? What we did was we looked at a 3-month average, and the 3-month average of homes that were in good standing came out to 13,956. So we used 14,000. Now, as the number of homes get built, as more homes get built in our community, that number is going to have to go up. And we're going to have to reassess that. So every several months, we're going to have to go, okay, is it 14,000? Is that the right number? Is it 14,100? Then 14,200, and so forth. So that's how we got to the $840,000. So the first thing is we repositioned $412,000 from golf to assessments. So a lot of people have notated that golf is subsidized to the tune of $2.2 million. So if we subsidize it 2.2 and we reposition $400,000 from golf to assessments, what's that going to do to the subsidy? It's going to go from 2.2 to 2.6. So I don't want anybody to be surprised when they see that number at the end of this year. Okay? Similar with recreation. So recreation we're repositioning because of the fitness, annual fitness in the pool and the beach, and lakes because of boat registrations, and general income because of the activity fees or the photo ID cards, because we sell about 10,000 of those each year, and with a $6 decrease, that's how you get to the math. So you'll see the total impact is $842,000. Next one. This is a much easier one. Okay, $2 will go towards the Trafalgar fire. And in the future, it'll go towards reserves, but right now we have to deal with the Trafalgar fire. That's $280,000, and we have legal fees of $280,000 in our budget. That's a pretty straightforward one. $4 will go towards operational costs and future financial capital improvements. That's $560,000. So right now, in the revised capital budget, we have $353,000 in capital projects. And it's in the packet that you have. It has a detail of every single project we're looking at. Okay. Remember, the target is 560. So we revised the operating budget. We had to increase the number of non-capital projects by $62,000. We're going to have to buy more fitness equipment. Okay? With more people, we anticipate more people will buy the activity card, more people will use the gym facilities, so we're going to have more cardio equipment. Okay? That is a non-capital item. So that's included in the 62. Additional picnic benches, the fish cleaning station was something that the LACE committee has been talking about for some time, so forth. The operating budget also went up by $579,000. That is compared to the fail budget, so it's a net increase. But I want to point out that the stump dump is included in there and the removal of the bridge. You could make an argument that I should not have included those two figures in the 579. So I called it out for you and showed it to you. And still, the total dollar amount is $994,000. If you were to deduct those two things, you would still be above the commitment, okay? But I wanted to make sure everybody, wanted to be as transparent as possible on those two. $1 will go towards rebuilding reserves, $140,000, and you'll see that in the simple cash flow budget, we have $140,000. Okay, important considerations. If you look at our financials over a year period, we're very seasonal. We bring in more money during the summertime when a lot of people play golf, and we bring in less money in October, November, and so forth. So the reason I'm pointing this out is because since our expenditures and our revenue are not this straight line throughout the year, the contributions to the financial commitments will not necessarily be a straight line, okay? So we'll probably contribute more during the summer and less during the off season and so forth. So I just want to make sure, so if anybody starts tracking on a specific basis on March and April and they go, wow, you're actually trending below, you're correct. And then we'll trend above in the summer months. What's most important is at the end of the year, we meet the financial obligation. Okay? All right, so here's the simple cash flow. Lots of numbers, so we highlighted the numbers at the bottom because that's what's most important. But you'll see on the very top you have the income, you have the cost of sales, expenses, and so forth. And you'll see that we've included, this is the new feature that we have on this new thing, you'll see the capital changes. And when it gets, and you'll see the water loan. Okay, now look at that water loan right there in the bottom, right there, the $280,000. Now I referenced earlier $280,000 was going towards the Trafalgar fire. There's two separate ones, two separate things. 280 towards the Trafalgar fire. It's in the operating budget. It's an expense. It's a legal expense. And then you have 280 that we're planning on paying back on the water loan. Okay, just coincidentally the same dollar amount. And you'll see that the simple cash flow ekes by at $4,000 over budget, over break even. Here's the water utility. See, the water utility really doesn't change too much between the pass and the fail and the revised budget. Not much of a change there. And to recap what our goals were when we were talking about the revised budget is to revise it based upon the assessment increase, update the budget with current information, make sure the budget is lean, and most importantly, make sure we fulfill the financial commitments that were made to the membership in the 2020 plan. Jim?
We have a motion to approve the budget.
I hate to be redundant, but I will rephrase it that I move that we approve the revised budget as submitted by management tonight.
Okay, Jim, that's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Jerry.
Second, yeah.
Jerry Barron. We've debated it a lot. Are we ready to vote? We are. Okay, I have Ruth's proxy on this. She stated that she would be voting in favor of this. So all in favor? That's 8. All opposed? 1 opposed. The next item is the proposed amenity fee schedule.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Nope, go right ahead.
On page 119 of your board packet, you will see the memo regarding the fee schedule, and on page 121, you will see a draft of the fee schedule. This is the trifold that we hand out at member services. So there's two issues on this. First, and I want to make sure I don't confuse anybody. So first of all, we have the amenity fee schedule. This is the same, or this format is the same format that we have used for a few years. So this is your annual fee schedule, and this is for 2020. And if you look at those fees are consistent with what was included on the 2020 plan assessment increase marketing material. Okay? So this is the fee schedule. The marketing material talked about making a commitment of 3 years. And there was a little bit of confusion because the first vote ended in November, and we were always talking about that it would last for 3 years because on the first vote for the assessment increase, it was going to kick in on January 1. On the second vote, which passed, it's kicking in on March 1. And some people continue to assume that it would be for 3 years. But the marketing material said it would carry through to the end of 2020. 2-month difference. When all said and done, it probably makes sense to just go through February 28th of 2023, make it a full 2 years. That way, if anybody thought it would go through to that time frame, that's the safest route. So it's two different motions, and I want to make sure we were clear. One was on the amenity fee schedule, which was for 2020, and one is on the fee schedule that the board is committing to for a 3-year period. The last point I want to make is there are a few fees, just a few, like Blowing Springs, the campground, that were never included on the 2020 plan, the assessment increase schedule. Okay? The 3-year commitment does not apply to those. Okay? And you'll see on the bottom of page 120, I specifically call out that note because I want to make sure we were very clear. So next year at this time, if we decide to increase camping fees, that's allowed. But we can't increase golf fees and so forth because that's committed for 3 years. Does that make sense to everybody? Fantastic.
Okay, so then we're asking for 2 separate motions, then one motion to approve the amenity fee schedule as you have it here. Is there a motion?
Okay, David, I make a motion to adopt the revised 2020 amenities fee schedule.
And is there a second to
Second.
that? Jim seconds. Ruth has stipulated for me to vote yes on this, so I'll call for a vote at this time. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. I would ask for a motion to keep this fee schedule in place until February 28, 2023. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Mary? Mary makes the motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Jerry Barron?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on
Uh,
that?
Just a comment. Of course, I'm in favor of it, but we're talking 3 boards ahead of this board. And I like the idea. I'm for it, but it's going to be hard to pin 3 future boards ahead of us to this agreement. So anyway.
Understood. Okay, Ruth says I should vote yes. All in favor? That's 9-0. I see no opposition. That is approved.
Blowing Springs Connector.
Okay, the next is the Blowing Springs Connector, is the next item. We have a PowerPoint presentation on that.
Testing. All right, we got both this time. Fantastic. All right, so the Blowing Springs Connector Agreement concept developed a 3-mile, it's actually 2.9 miles, connector that will service many of the East Side residents. Kids from Cooper Elementary could potentially ride their bikes safely to school. Would be possible to ride from Metfield Park all the way down to Fayetteville, about 40 miles on a 10-foot wide concrete path. Okay, a little background. I want to make sure everybody kind of gets a historical perspective on the connector. So this corridor, this connector was talked about in the early 2000s. Next one, we were actually contacted by a former chair of the Recreation Committee, and they were pointing out that over 10 years ago, this specific connector was being talked about by the Recreation Committee. Next, first was on the BV Trail Master Plan, showed this trail in 2010. The POA sponsored a meeting held in December 2013 to seek input regarding the trails. If you remember that old Village Voice pamphlet that would be sent out, it was included in that. Also in, the regional bike plan was adopted by City Council in an open session in 2014. The POA held sponsored a meeting in June of 2014 that was open to the public. Once again, that was covered in the Village Voice that was sent out to every property owner. In March of 2015, another meeting was held that also went sent out to all property owners in the Village Voice, and it was an open meeting. The proposed connector was included in an article in March of 2016 that was also sent out to every property owner. That was in the magazine. It was shortly lived. The name was called UR, and now it's called Inside Bella Vista, and you get that every month. But that article was featured there. And then there was a community input meeting at Cooper Elementary in March of last year. And then the city of Bella Vista approved the agreement in January of 2020. So just to give you a little perspective, when a license agreement is signed, it has to be approved by the city and by the POA because we're partnering together. And all those meetings are open to the public. So here's a view of the Blowing Springs connector, and you'll see down in the bottom left-hand corner, that is where Blowing Springs Park is, and you go all the way up, and it goes up Euston, and then it does a quick button hook at the top and follows Commonwealth and gets to Metfield Park. So this is the plan that was included. This actual map was featured in that 2016 article. All right, challenges. Okay, so at the March meeting, overall a very positive response at that March meeting, but there was a couple concerns. The first one was drainage, and they actually went through and they did a tremendous amount of work on drainage. We actually met with some of the engineers earlier today, and there was one area where the culvert, where they didn't install a pipe. So they had a culvert and then it just kind of ended, and there's no pipe to drain it out. They're actually going to fix that, so this will improve drainage in that area. They moved the connector further away from the road. A lot of people were concerned about the rate of speed of cars in that area. Next thing is a number of property owners were concerned about the number of crossings. In the original plans, in a couple areas, they had the connector crossing, and then just a couple, a few yards down, they had the soft surface crossing, right on the same road, right next to each other. It didn't make sense, so they combined those. Also, they wanted to make sure there was as much accessibility as possible. So the entire 2.9 miles is AASHTO compliant. I'm not an engineer, but we spoke with their engineers earlier today, so it's fully AASHTO compliant. There is a 200-foot section of the connector. It's up at the corner of Euston and Commonwealth, where it pops up pretty steep at the very end. It is above a 5% grade, but below an 8.34% grade, and that's an important. So what I was told this morning, and I didn't realize this, is so if you go into a ramp into a building, those typically are at 8.33% grade. So that'll give you an idea of what that grade is like. So it pops up, but it's 200 feet. But even with that 200-foot section, the engineers told us it is still fully AASHTO compliant. And you've got to keep in mind that you want to have it consistent with the road, because you don't want the connector higher or lower than the road. All right, details. Connects Blowing Springs Park all the way up to Metfield, 2.9 miles long, 10-foot wide. Most of the connector path is on Euston with a buffer of approximately 10+ feet. The Blowing Springs connector will connect with the Razorback Regional Greenway. If approved, the estimated completion is approximately the fourth quarter of this year. No added maintenance costs. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. So when the board approved the back 40, one of the issues that came with that was the $35,000 to maintain the back 40. And when Little Sugar, the central section, was approved, $35,000 in maintenance was approved for that to maintain those. This does not come with it. It's concrete. Now the city will still have to maintain the roadside. They'll still have to mow, but they won't have to mow that 10-foot strip. Okay. In your board packet, it talks about landings. And at one point, we thought this would be a workable idea in that 200-foot section having landings. But as we spoke with the engineers today, they actually said it would make it worse. Because if you have a slope, and I'm going to try and describe this, and hopefully I do a decent job. If you have a slope that's 8.33%, and if you create a landing, then to catch back up, you have to have more than an 8.33. So actually having a landing will actually make the situation
worse. I wasn't aware of that when I wrote the memo. So when you're reading the memo, forgive me. Okay, an amendment. So a couple years ago, the state amended code to clarify Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 e-bikes, okay, electronic bikes. And if you've ever seen them, you can see, you know, they have a little bit thicker frame and they're much heavier, but it's getting to a point where it's harder and harder to actually tell if it's a bike or an e-bike. But with this code change, so what we're recommending is that at the same time that the board, assuming they want to do this, approves the Blowing Springs connector, they also approve this amendment, which then allows Class 1 e-bikes on the connector. And a Class 1 e-bike must be pedal assisted, and the assistance stops at 20 miles per hour. Class 2 and Class 3 bikes, e-bikes, can go faster, or you don't have to have pedal assistance at all. Okay? I think it's Class 2, no pedal assistance at all, and the assistance stops at 20 miles an hour. And Class 3, it stops at 26, 28 miles an hour. But those are not allowed, would not be allowed on the Blowing Springs connector. Not easy. And this is on page 123 of your board packet.
Okay, the first thing we need is a motion to accept this, approve it.
I make a motion to approve the proposed limited terminable license agreement to the Blowing Springs connector.
Is there a second? Mary? Mary will second that. Okay. Is there discussion on this? Anybody have a statement? Jim?
I do. I hate to say this, but this is kind of my swan song in my active life in Bella Vista since 1974. And I was part of the design of 660 miles of streets in Bella Vista. And we always got complaints from the retirement magazines that we had no sidewalks. Right now, with 660 miles of streets, we have a half mile of 4-foot sidewalk right below us in this new subdivision. And that's it. And when I moved here, I always envisioned the Houston-Manchester reach because it's about the most gentle reach of its distance in the entire Bella Vista community because of our terrain. And today we saw some real detailed design, and I absolutely applaud the EDG, the design and engineering firm, and they answered all of my questions, maybe not all the board, but they answered all of mine. And regarding your comments from the open forum, the stretch along Houston near Metfield, or near Melanie and Merritt, where you are, the right-of-way tends to be closer to Houston Road, which is kind of away from your tree line. So a specific comment to the open forum, but I can't act like a city councilman here because I've never been more enthusiastic about a project in 46 years I've lived here. I just think it's a no-brainer. And I don't mind if others disagree, but I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful, and I would like to, if we pass it, I'd like to lead a delegation along from Metfield Park to Kessler Mountain in Fayetteville with a few stopovers at some bars. And that'd be some 40 miles, and I hope it's approved, but if not, I understand that too. So anyway, that's it.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Jerry?
I need to take a little bit different view from what Jim has just said. And First of all, I want to say I want to thank all of the people that have sent us emails, all the comments over the time period that people have given, whether it's pro, con, or something else. But I'm a little bit torn overall because my entire life I've built upon credibility and integrity, and I have to end up in doing one of two things. One, making a motion to amend it, and the amendment would be to force it to be ADA compliant. AASHTO is good. Yes, all the trails have been, at least I'm told they're all built to that standard. I'm concerned about, we have basically within Bella Vista about a third of new families with children, about a third that are retired, and then another third somewhere in between, you know, that they're still not retired, but yet they're not young families. But in particular, for small kids, I mean, the route is touted to be a safe route to school. Okay, and yes, they plan to build it to AASHTO, but also they've claimed that the current trails have been built to that standard, including Branchwood. Now, if you've been on Branchwood, you can see how high that slope is. Okay, I didn't go out and measure it. It's much more than 5%. The 200 feet that is above at 8.34%, it's pretty steep. It doesn't appear that the road is that steep, but I think there are some other options that haven't been looked at. Basically, I just got the plans yesterday. I did make a mistake in this morning's meeting that we had about it, in that I said there was a 8% down in the Blowing Springs area. That statement is incorrect. I don't make any other excuses except my eyes saw 8 rather than something else what it should have been. I apologize for that. But the 8% is either on a terminus, either going down, coming up. Okay, you got another section that goes on over to Metfield. I believe it's very possible, yeah, it costs a little more to build a connector trail coming off the bottom of that somewhere through some properties. It may impact other people. There just hasn't been enough time yet to really look at these things. You know, I find it difficult that goes clear back to the early 2000s and was a big push in 2010, and I don't understand why it wasn't built prior to the mountain bike trails. So I'm torn with it because I know it's something that's needed, it's necessary, and a lot of people want it, but I'm just afraid that they have a mental picture that it's going to be a nice gentle slope all the way down. Myself, I would have a problem climbing that 200 feet at 8 1/3% without some way of getting off the trail, stopping, resting, so on through there. I'm scared that a small child, say a first, second grader, take their bikes, start from the top, and can't stop when they need to. We've been going through a lot of things for golf. Now planning to reopen Burksdale, but have to do it in waves. Why? Because they're afraid people in golf carts are going to crash. Okay? Why do we then need to sacrifice our citizens, our members, in a trail that can, if they really use their minds and their abilities in this day and age, there's really nothing that can't be done. And that's why I need to vote no to it. I don't know. Maybe the first thing that I'll try is to offer an amendment to it to clear up a section that's in the agreement that says they must meet applicable federal, state, local laws. They don't define applicable. They leave that up to the engineer or to someone else, what is applicable. And in this case, I fully believe that applicable means ADA. So I will make that motion for the amendment.
And if I may, David, if I may comment, I respect Jerry's comments, and I do disagree regarding the design gradients because of the terrain in Bella Vista, and much of the existing 50 miles of the Razorback Greenway reaching south and west of Fayetteville, extensions through Rogers, Bentonville, Fayetteville, because of the similar terrain, much of the gradients for long reaches are more than a 10% gradient. But it does tend to accommodate bikers and wheel-type vehicles better.
I think I had the floor, and I was
I'm
not
sorry.
finished.
I apologize. I thought you were completed.
No, I was making a motion to amend the original motion to clear up the phrase in there, applicable, and make it ADA compliant.
Okay,
That
that's
is
my turn.
motion.
It's my turn because there was no motion yet.
Okay.
I had not
Excuse
made a motion. I had
Excuse me.
discussed it.
Okay, Jerry's made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Hearing none, we will move on. Are there other comments on the original motion?
Did I make a motion? I apologize. I got rambling.
Yeah, you made an original
good.
motion.
If I
Jerry
did-
seconded it.
If I did, I'm
We're-
sorry,
we're in-
Jerry. I
We're in
apologize.
discussion.
I got
Jerry's
to
motion-
rambling and I forgot about my motion.
Yeah, Jerry's motion dies for lack of a second. There are other comments about the original motion. Stephen?
Yeah, I want to recognize also that there's a lot of members who want the trail, but there's also members who are very concerned about it. And my job is to listen to both sides, consider the governing documents, then ask questions and get answers. I just want to reiterate that this concrete trail is in fact a trail. It's not a path, it's not a connector, it's not a greenway, it's a trail. The PRA already defines the rest of our concrete trails as trails. The City of Fayetteville defines trails as including concrete surfaces, and of course there's the recreational use statute that talks about trails. I would agree with Jerry about the ADA compliance and believe that there's a certain perception. You know, we did receive a lot of emails in support of it, and they were very interesting. Appreciate everybody's opinions. But there seems to be this impression that it will be a very easy stroll in the park, but if you have not walked Branchwood, you may want to do that and then consider whether we or not we should be ADA compliant. I have other concerns, liability, the proximity to Brittany Golf Course. I would still like to see a study done, not just on the ADA compliance issue, but on moving the trail to that eastern side of Houston. I think that would solve lots of problems, including perhaps even this ADA question. the other side may be easier to manipulate. On the maintenance question, you know, it says in there that we're supposed to maintain it. And I'm not sure what that exactly means, except I do know that we agreed in the 2020 plan that the POA would not maintain the trail. It'll be different. Blowing Springs will be different. There'll be sod that isn't there, apparently. We're looking to add parts south of Blowing Springs as well as north out of Blowing Springs, so it's not as if we're just still maintaining Blowing Springs, but additional acreage. So speaking of that, the parcels go south of Blowing Springs, but it's the plans for the trail are actually just start in Blowing Springs. So it seems to me we either need to be told exactly what that means, why are we including those parcels to the south, or we just need to eliminate them. They don't make sense why they're in there to me. Up at the corner where that button hook Tom referenced at Houston and Commonwealth, there's a linking parcel that does not appear part of the list in the parcels, and it looks like it is a right-of-way, but there's other right-of-ways that are listed that I don't understand why that particular one is not. So it seems as though we're trying to build something that we don't have a permit for. The other issue, of course, is compensation. We're being asked to license hundreds of trails, or hundreds of acres again, for zero compensation, or $10 for 25 years. And you can do research, I think people have, that other parts of this trail have been subject to eminent domain where the landholder is compensated. Other issues are, you know, there's Section 1. There's no actual guarantee that the thing will be built. Section 13, you know, it goes through our popular Blowing Springs and Brittany, but we are forbidden to restrict usage. For example, if someone's getting married in Blowing Springs and they have a huge wedding going on, we can't restrict the use of our property for that. So I think, you know, the ADA compliance is certainly a huge issue, but in my opinion, there's just so much more. And I know Jerry made a motion. It was not seconded. What I would do is make a motion to postpone indefinitely this proposal until all questions and concerns are fully answered.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Is there any discussion on that?
Are we allowed to?
You are allowed to discuss
the
that.
tabling?
Yes, I would like to, at first, in response to what Steve has said, it's unfortunate that you were unable to attend the engineers meeting this morning. Many of these items were addressed to the satisfaction of the board members there, with the exception of Jerry's concerns about ADA. We feel comfortable going forward. We feel that it's time to move the project along. Your concerns have been noted, and it's not the first time that we've heard them, but any other discussion on the motion to table? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of tabling this motion? Three. Table the motion. All opposed? Motion is not tabled. We will consider the original motion for the Blowing Spring Connector
If I may
terminable lease
say
agreement.
something, please?
Sure.
Okay, you had asked for some discussion, and then you discussed your point of view and went directly to the vote. That's not what you
Point taken. Is there further discussion on the licensing agreement?
Yes.
Yeah.
I 100% want to pass this. I really do. This connector, the way the community has reached out and they know they want this, we know they want this, and I think it's a great addition to our community, but my job is to approve this licensing agreement. And in this licensing agreement, it does not say zero funds will be used from our members for this. We promised this with the assessment passing that no funds would be used. I know we're stating it, we've said it 100 times, that it's no additional maintenance. My fear is that this is a license agreement for 25 years, and it does not specifically say in the agreement that we will not spend any additional funds. If there's a natural disaster, which we saw happen last year with a windstorm and trees were knocked down and concrete was destroyed, and the POA is responsible for replacing it. This is our land. Even in the license agreement, I feel it should specifically state that if that concrete is damaged, that is the responsibility of the city to maintain and not us. So that is my only opposition to this. Again, I really want it to pass, but I cannot approve an agreement that doesn't specifically state our financial responsibility.
And Doug, help me out here. I basically tend to agree that because we pledged that in the 2020 plan, and we pledged that in this, that we would not expend any more money for whether it's trails or whether this is a pathway until 2023. We didn't say 25 years, but is it possible with the city's accord to throw an amendment in there that we will not maintain this parcel till 2023 or till March of 2023 with our extension? Is that reasonable?
We could do an amendment, but it would be an amendment to this original agreement since
And then the city would need to approve it too?
approved that, yes.
And as we talked with the designers today, a good stretch of the 2.9 miles will be within the 80-foot right-of-way of Houston Road, and also some of it will be within the 60-foot right-of-way of Manchester Drive, especially as you get closer to Commonwealth, because the corridor gets tighter and the grades get tougher. And we realize that the city maintenance of their 80-foot right-of-way occurs at least twice a year in a brush hogging capacity. So I tend to agree with her comment regarding the lease itself, that if we can impose that with the city until our pledge of the 2020 fee schedule and the 2020 plan, because we did state it in that we wouldn't spend any more than what we've already obligated on, whether this is a trail or a paved pathway from a definition standpoint.
Would be a separate agreement, or a separate amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
a couple of further comments. I hope you just misspoke and said lease, because we're not leasing.
We're leasing agreement with the city.
License agreement?
License,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, well said. Good
Okay.
correction.
My last point, and I'll shut up after this, and that is it keeps saying that it's a connector to the Razorback. And unless I'm very, very wrong, there's a section that does not connect. It
Yeah.
starts in Blowing Springs, and the Greenway does not come up fully to where this is.
Yeah, and you are, in that respect, you are very, very wrong. The current greenway extends through the soccer field, which is in Bentonville. It extends on the north side of the soccer field, which is in Bentonville, extends across the street, which is part of Cooper Elementary property, and then it currently stops at a parking lot about 40 feet into common property, POA property.
Right. So it does not connect.
Not yet. So I
There's a
guess in a way we agree.
Does not mean, so.
But it's not connected now, but if approved, it would be.
because I believe that someone mentioned that there wouldn't be any additional maintenance in that area because it's all brush.
And-
Well, if it's all brush, how do we have a trail through it? But anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, along the two street right-of-ways. Now, in Blowing Springs Park, we've got explanation from Joan and her rec committee that they maintain all of Blowing Springs Park anyway.
Yeah. As I looked at the engineering documents, it does connect to the end right there at Blowing Springs. It goes right from there. It's right by a parking lot, and it starts right there and heads on to the east. So it looked to me like it was definitely connected. Are there any other comments? Okay, we're going to call a vote on that.
More comment, sorry. Understanding the concerns about maintenance, Jimmy has them, Tia has them, we all have them, and we don't have that. Can we amend this motion to say that we will pass this limited, whatever we want to call this thing, licensee, with the exception that we will have an amendment to this license that says we won't be responsible for any maintenance, so that we can get these people started?
Until a date.
Until whatever the date is, March of 2023.
Yeah.
Because that's, things can change in that amount of time. Can we pass it with that exception? Can we make an amendment to that motion?
You could do that. It would be contingent upon the city passing that. You would have that requirement.
We'd have to go back to the city to get them to
Correct.
agree
Yes.
to an amendment to this contract that would state that.
Just like you're doing with the e-bikes. There's
So that way we can
language
go
in the
forward
e-bikes.
with this. It's the same thing as the e-bikes. We can go forward with this. Would we have to re-vote again in like a month?
I think what you're asking, do we attach it to this motion, or do we make it a separate amendment motion like we have with the e-bikes? After we vote on this, if it's approved, we will be voting on the limiting to e-bike class 1, which is a separate. So with what you're asking, and it sounds like a lot of people would like to talk about it, it would be an amendment that we would do at a later date and then ask the city to agree to that.
It'll be an amendment that'd be required at a later date, otherwise this
It would be an
wouldn't-
amendment that would be required at a later date.
Otherwise, we don't approve this.
We can go through with this and get that started, and then move on to the e-bikes, and then
Because I know there's going to have to be some specific wording
Just like
to
we've done,
accommodate that.
Just like
We're
we've drafted
not
an
capable
amendment
of
for
putting that
e-bikes, we
wording
would do the
together
same
tonight.
thing for
I think
for
it's something
maintenance.
that we would want to let legal work on for a little bit before we have a public vote on it, and get some conversation with the city also.
Doug, is that possible that we could have that ready for next month's board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Then I
Depending
think-
on the
I think we
response from the
should
city.
proceed with that clarification or rider.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible, and I think it's quite likely that we'll be talking about it. So, okay, with that said, I call for a vote on the motion to approve the proposed limited terminal license agreement for the Blowing Springs connector. Ruth has said she votes yes, strongly. I call for a vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those opposed? 2. Okay, moving forward, the next item is the e-bike provision.
It's on page 137 of your board packet.
Good. Plowing through the 174 pages. Okay, will somebody make that motion?
I move we approve the First Amendment to the limited terminable license agreement, which has to do with the Blowing Springs connector and Class 1 e-bicycles.
A second.
Second from Jim. Okay, Is there discussion?
Just a general question, what, are e-bikes new? In other words, is there a reason they weren't in there originally in 2018? What's sort of the thinking, planning behind this amendment?
Okay, I think Tom has some information.
They definitely are new, or at least you're seeing them a lot more. They're a lot more common now than they have been in the past. And the state changed the code in 17, is that correct?
2017.
Okay, so, and what, I was talking to the mayor about this, and what happens often is the state will change the state statute, and then the cities within the state will then have to make adjustments as a result of that. So they're actually, the city of Bella Vista is actually moving forward on making a change, and I provided that language to the board that the city is actually working on. But to answer your question, you're seeing them a lot more often than you, 10 years ago you never saw them. Now you see them pretty often.
So so the state is basically reacting to their popularity and putting it into their code, and we're following?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Jerry?
Actually, I kind of started this thing, and the reason for it is the current agreements prohibit, okay, and we know it's happening, so let's legitimize it, what it amounts to. And I myself, if I want to get an e-bike, I would be able to climb the 8% with it without any problem. So that will help in that manner. One other comment I've got, in all of the agreements, there's, at least the ones that we're looking at today, are pretty much the same. And it combines everything, all the uses and so on, and the names of trails and different things, to the trails. But yet the rest of the document is not consistent with that. Talks about maintaining the greenway after the greenway is built, so on. I just have problems when things are not consistent going through them. It seems like we should be able to do it right the first time rather than have to come back and do an amendment.
I guess I agree with a couple of Jerry's comments. I think the fact that if we approve e-bikes, it'll especially help the population in Bella Vista because of the terrain of Bella Vista is as steep as some of the rest of the Razorback Greenway and other trails, and I think it'll be helpful for the older population, and so I agree with Jerry in that regard.
Other comments? We'll call for a vote then to approve the motion. First Amendment to the Limited Terminable License Agreement, which has to do with the Blowing Springs Connector and e-bikes. Ruth has said yes. All in favor?
Didn't you make a motion? Okay, you did. Okay.
I see no opposition. Next is the Blowing Spring Connector Landing decision, which we learned this morning that the engineers are very against landings. They say it makes it more dangerous, makes certain areas steeper, as Tom referenced, and personally, I think that if a person can get 2.5 miles, they'll be able to manage the last 200 feet, since that 200 feet is the same grade that we find on the ramps when you use them for ADA compliance. They're at 8.33%. So, is there a motion to approve the amendment as stated about landings. Hearing none, there is none. We'll move on to the trailheads for the Back 40 and Little Sugar Creek.
It's page 143 of your board packet. There are numerous trailheads on the east side, the Back 40, and on the central section, Little Sugar. Some of these trailheads are not under the control of the POA or the city. They're actually, for example, the community church and Assembly of God they have trailheads. But you see on page 147 is a list of all of the trailheads that are either on POA property or the one that is on would be on city property at the streets department. And this agreement would solidify those trailhead locations.
Okay, now as you look at the parcel numbers, those parcels in many cases contain a lot of acres. And we're not talking about using all the acres for parking. It's a very specific area. As you go through, and you'll see the diagrams, the pictures marked in red, giving you the idea of the area where these are going to be. So, back to
Does the agreement state that it's limited to those red areas?
It does, yes. Trailhead locations are further identified and limited to those areas outlined in red for those parcels represented by pictures in Exhibit A.
what page is the motion on?
Page 143.
Okay, so we need to find places for these people to park so they don't park on the street. If you build it, they will come. Jerry?
Okay, I have some problems about the trailheads. For one, the one in Blowing Springs, they're already in use. They're already maxed out at many times. And now we're going to throw another use in there on top of it with the new connector. Someone has reserved the entire park. We can't keep out the people using whatever we end up calling it, the greenway, the connector, the whatever. We can't prohibit anybody from going through there, but yet somebody has paid bucks to rent the whole park. So I think those are problem areas. Another one is that when you look at the Tweety Bird, in some ways, I mean, it's a very good place to have it, but it sits down in a hole. There are massive drainage coming through under the road that washed out even part of the road and part of everything else. So I foresee that the next really heavy downpour is going to wash that parking lot clear out. Okay, and since this is a separate motion and a separate deal, is it covered under the no maintenance for POA or is it not? It's a question that hadn't been answered.
Can I answer that?
And there's, I'm not sure where they're at in the processes of building, constructing. I mean, in many of these trailheads, they've already started constructing before we even approved them. And I'm curious whether the surface, if they're at an end point for one of these parking areas, is that surface the correct surface to meet city codes and ACC? I mean, the Tweety Bird one appears to be the finished product, other than final grading of it because they've already put bumpers down. So I don't know. I mean, it's a question that's out there. The other question I have, you said, you know, we're not using all of the parcel, but yet many of these seem to follow parcel lines. So it bothers me a whole lot the way they are. You know, are they going to have connectors to the trails? So those are my questions.
Can I jump in? Sure. Regarding the maintenance for the trailheads that are on the back 40, they would fall under the $35,000 that is already committed on the for the back 40. There would be no additional maintenance fees, and for this area in the central section, the same with the $35,000 that's already been committed. So there would be no additional commitment of funds to maintain those trails, those trailheads. Also, they are required, and they have consistently done this, required to meet all city standards and get all city permits. I know earlier you, Jerry, at the meeting this morning, you asked me for to show you the permits for the bridge that is going over Little Sugar, and I have that on my desktop, and I will be able to share that with you tomorrow. They have all the permits in order.
Ask for a motion and then second.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve this?
You need a motion first to continue the
Yeah,
discussion.
we need a motion to discuss. So will somebody make a motion to approve the trailheads?
I move that we approve the trailheads as listed in Exhibit A, recognizing that many of them are already built, and the fact that we now, in Exhibit A, we've excluded the wonderful charity from both the Community Church and the Assembly of God Church in an agreement because it doesn't affect our maintenance. But I would like to, if accepted, I would like to thank those two churches as well for offering trailheads where the proposed or existing trails are already located.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Tia seconds. Now we can have discussion.
So for example, the parcel is under consideration, and then there's the red part of the parcel. Is the assumption that the whole red part is going to be used as the trailhead? Is that, or will there be additional facilities built, or what's, I don't know how large the parking lots are going to be.
The assumption that it will be someplace within that that red line. It's very unlikely that it would be as large as those are.
Right.
They will situate the trailhead
somewhere in there.
When they get there. As a lot of the trails are built, you know, they can change a little bit as they run into terrain and whatnot. And I would assume that the parking lots are also subject to a wee bit of change. But it will be within those boundaries.
And then, you know, back when we talked about building an archery range over there on our McNelly property, I believe the city informed us that the parking lot itself had to be concrete or asphalt. So I'm going to assume or believe, unless told otherwise, and I think the ones on the back 40 are already concrete. I think the one at Bear Hollow is concrete. Or will all of these also be concrete?
Or asphalt.
Or asphalt.
So the requirement is where there's so I'm going to use the gun range as an example. That at the gun range, the parking lot is by and large gravel, dirt, but there is a section for handicap parking that is asphalt or concrete, and that parking lot is to code, and that handicap spot was actually added about a year to 2 years ago. So you could say prior to the addition of that, it was not to code.
Right, I don't think that's in the city. I think these are all in the city, so I'm assuming that it'll be a
I'm
different
just using that.
situation.
No, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
You know, where they have to have handicap
So-
parking, they'll have to have,
Right.
but you'll see most trailheads are gravel.
I'm thinking all the ones on the back 40, I haven't visited them all. But in any event, what I'd like to suggest is that they do be made of asphalt or concrete, since I believe, like I said, it was the city who informed us they had to be that way anyway. So we want to be consistent. And then if they are asphalt or concrete, perhaps we could stripe and number them and then put up donation boxes to help offset some of our ongoing costs for these things. Will there be additional facilities such as porta potties or anything like that constructed? Has there been any discussion? Water?
They have installed water on some of the back 40 trailheads, or at least one trailhead. Several. But I have not heard of any plans one way or the other for Little Sugar.
I mean, seems like a good idea.
Where we can get water in
Well,
reasonably, they've done
porta
that.
potties. Sorry.
Trey, how many locations have porta potties? How many locations on the back 40 have porta potties, do you know? Do any of them? Right. For example, the Metfield parking lot has bathroom facilities through the golf course.
Right. Right, I don't mean to put Trey on the spot or anything, but I don't know if we've talked about it and, you know, what we're actually looking at with these trailheads.
Jerry?
That was one of my questions, is what is included within a trailhead? And a second one is there plans and will they be built with handicap stalls according to what it should be for the number of parking spots? And we talk about meeting city codes. ACC is also involved, so are they meeting ACC as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the parking lots, some of these questions are very specific, and I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to be able to answer every question. Every parking lot will be built to city, state, federal standards. They do not stray from those standards in any way, shape, or form. They will be built to the standards. I don't know what those standards are. I can just tell you that they will build them to standard.
Tia?
Those were kind of my same questions, but please don't shoot me, Doug, if this is a stupid question. But with this agreement being, if this passed, does the city have the ability to build a snack shop or put porta potties wherever they want? Can they do anything other than build a gravel or asphalt or concrete trailhead?
No, they'd have to come to us and to expand the scope of anything that, what you're talking about there would be an expansion of scope, which.
Thank you.
Seeing no other comments, I call for a vote. All those in favor of the trailheads motion? Opposed? 2. 7 favor, 2 opposed.
David, we're pretty much done with item XII, are we?
Yes.
I'd just like to make a personal comment. We've been dealing with soft trails, and now our first segment of hard trails that we did approve, we got a couple amendments within a month, but I don't stand for anybody other than myself, but I absolutely applaud the Walton Family Foundation for their money and their reach, and we found out today that this 2.9 miles is paid solely from funds from the Walton Foundation, Family Foundation. Some of the existing 50 miles has been paid by federal funds, multimodal transportation funds, and the Walton Foundation. And I personally want to thank the Walton Foundation. I don't think we've ever felt the warrant to thank them for roughly $8 million of improvements, trails, and the blue signs that they've helped us with in the past 5 years. So that's just my personal comment.
I would echo that sentiment. We seem to be pick. We need to stop and thank these people for the wonderful amenities and improvements that they've made in our community and make life better for all of us. So I definitely, that sentiment, we thank them. Next.
Next up on your agenda on page 163 of your board packet is the second reading of a modification to policy 1.00, which will incorporate the term and the definition for activity card with the passage of the assessment increase. Right now we only have photo ID cards. We're changing the name to activity card. This is really kind of a stopgap measure. The Rules and Regulations Committee is working on additional changes that need to go into effect as a result of the assessment increase being passed. But this would be the second of 2 required readings to pass to modify policy 1.00.
Okay, the second. Okay, is there a motion to?
David, I'll make a motion to approve the proposed changes to policy 1.00, which will incorporate the term activity card into our policies. This is the second of 2 required readings.
Thank you, David.
Second.
Second from Steve. I don't expect any discussion, so we'll vote. All in favor? Thank you. 9-0. Moving on, we will now address proposed new wake boat regulations, or in general, boating regulations.
This is the last PowerPoint of the day, I'm happy to say. And I think you're happy to say too. Okay. The goal is to develop a regulation to control the use of wake boats on the POA lakes. Second one, to balance the interests of varying people, meaning lakefront owners and boat owners, wake boat owners, and ensure the regulation is both reasonable and enforceable. So background, the Lakes Committee received a number of complaints regarding wake boats and the wake that was being caused by these boats, and they started investigating this approximately 2 years ago. They put a tremendous amount of research into it, and they ended up developing recommendations that were issued to the Rules and Regulations Committee. The committee, the Rules and Regulations Committee, then took those recommendations and codified them into policy, or actually, I'm sorry, into a regulation that would be incorporated into our overall boating regulation. The Rules and Regulation Committee voted on those changes and approved them, and thus recommending them to the Board of Directors. Proposed regulations. So fishing and pleasure boats, there would be no change. It would remain at 100 feet from the shoreline. For water ski and tubing, it would be increased from 100 feet to 200 feet. And for wake boats, it would go from 150 feet to 200 feet. Okay. Now, in the regulation, and that is included in your board packet, I don't know the page number off the top of my head, you'll see that we actually describe
the, the, the activity, because it's, a wake boat is not just a term that you say, okay, this is a wake boat. It's actually an activity taking on ballast or using other devices that create that wake. So we actually had to describe the action as opposed to just saying wake boats. So you'll see in the regulations, there's a very detailed description because we had to describe the action, not just label it wake boats, because of the technologies that's out there, it's not this hard and fast, this is a wake boat, this is not a wake boat. It's a lot more complicated than that. And you can have a wake boat that doesn't take on ballast and won't create an enlarged wake. But once it takes on ballast, then it creates an enlarged wake. So in the one sense, it's not a problem. In the other sense, it is a problem. So that's why we describe the action. Okay, next steps. Assuming if the board were to approve it today, any change in regulation, I'm sorry, let me back up. So normally when a policy is changed, it takes 2 votes. For example, when the board was changing policy 1.00, they did the second vote, then it goes into effect. During the discussion, during the creation of this, there was various times where we used the word policy and various times that we used the word regulation, okay? Including myself, there was times that I used the word policy. A regulation technically only requires 1 vote of the board, but the board decided because there was some confusion caused that they would require 2 votes. So if they vote on it tonight and if they approve it and send it forth, it will then go to an open session at the work session on March 19th and then would be voted upon on the second time on the March 26th regular meeting. But I just want to clarify that you technically don't need that second vote for a regulation, but it's just required. But it's probably prudent because we wouldn't want anybody to get the impression that the board is racing through this regulation and not taking 2 votes. Okay. Reevaluation. The Lakes Committee, this is not the first step that the Lakes Committee has taken. This is actually the second step. Last year, they made the recommendation to take wake boats from 100 feet to 150 feet. This then goes to 200 feet. So the Lakes Committee has clearly stated that they want to reevaluate and potentially change it down the road, but they want to see how it goes this time and then make potential future changes. So they don't want anybody to get the impression that this is the end of the effort. Now, the board may stipulate further research for the Lakes Committee, potentially setting up neighborhood watch style. This would be very helpful. All too often, the lake rangers will receive a complaint and the property owner will say, 2 weeks ago, a wake boat did this. Well, we can't do anything about it. It was 2 weeks ago, unless you can tell me who owned that wake boat, the date and time. So if we were to set up a neighborhood watch, and Jerry Hover came up with this idea, if we created a neighborhood watch where we can then contact the lake rangers immediately and go educate that property owner that's using that boat incorrectly. Also, monthly reporting to make sure that we're staying on top of this. The proposed, well, at this point, it's been approved. The approved revised budget for 2020 includes sufficient funds for lake rangers. Okay? We wanted to make sure with this, we anticipated that this new regulation would go through, the wake boat regulation would go through. We wanted to make sure we included in the budget a sufficient number of rangers. The Lakes Committee has additional recommendations that are not regulations. For example, when you register a wake boat, we're going to ask you to identify it. And you're going to have a different type of sticker, which will allow us to more clearly identify that is a wake boat, that is a ski boat, and so forth. Recap, develop a regulation to control the use of wake boats on the POA lakes. I really want to emphasize this second one. This has been very challenging for the board and for the Lakes Committee, where they have to balance the interests, at times conflicting interests, of property owners. And they're trying to strike that delicate balance between both parties and ensure the regulation is both reasonable and enforceable. So Rick Eccles and the Lake Rangers were involved in this to make sure that we didn't develop a regulation that was not reasonable for the Lake Rangers to actually enforce. So we involved them in the process that's making it enforceable. And that's the end of my presentation.
And that one, do you know what page that's on right off?
168.
Page 168. Will someone make that motion?
No, I forgot.
I think I'm losing my,
I make a motion to amend the boating regulations to incorporate the language developed for the regulation of wake boats. This is the first of 2 readings.
thank you. Second? Jerry Barron, second. Discussion. David?
To the gentleman that spoke to us earlier, his name was Bill, I didn't get his last name. And I think he lives on Loch Lomond, he was talking about Tyree. If we, even though this is the first reading, we pass this, that doesn't preclude us from at some point in the near future of prohibiting boats from operating within we can change it to say, or a future board could change it to say that any boat operating above 5 miles an hour has to be 150 feet. We can make that at any time in a year after we've reviewed this.
That is correct.
Okay. The reason I say that is because I like to fish, and I will not go close to a lake that allows anything above idle speed. I'm out there fishing to have fun. I don't want to spill my drink or my beer or drop a fish somewhere. So I like the way this is worded. I'm just glad that we can go back at some point and revise this as necessary to make it safer for our people using those areas in close to shore, whether they're fishing or kayaking or the kids are just out there swimming.
And that's a good point, that, you know, these things can be changed, and as Tom said, the Lakes Committee has studied this particular issue for 2 years. They're not done with it. They know they're not done with it. They're continuing to monitor, as Tom said. They want to keep looking at it. We want to keep the enjoyment of our lakes for all property owners as best we can. So we keep looking at these things. Other comments?
One more question, David, if I may, sorry. We discussed this in some of our meetings. Do we know how many wake boats that we have registered?
We make
Approximately 10.
assumptions.
10.
Approximately 10.
In the event that this becomes an issue, are we looking at capping that at some point? Is that a possibility? Is that something we can do?
Question
Yeah, we've had outside law firm look at that as well, and it's either an all or nothing type of thing at this point, we've been told. So there's other possibilities that we could look at, but for now it's you either allow them or you don't.
Okay, thank you.
And you put reasonable restrictions in place for when you do allow them.
Stephen?
Yeah, a couple of things on this regulation that I'll just start with one, and then I'll have others, but I'd like to, where in the world did the idea come from that we should allow houseboats on our lakes?
We do not.
In Section 8, it says that watercraft with permanent sleeping facilities, permanent kitchen, bath and toilet facilities are permitted and must be registered. However, the use of such facilities which would result in any matter being thrown, dumped, or put into the lakes is prohibited because of our policy forbids it.
Can I jump in? Just real quick? Okay, so Jerry
Director Hover pointed that out, that he felt that the regulations as a whole needed work. So he was requested, and the email went out to the entire board, requested that we approve the regulation, that we limit the motion to approving the regulation just for wake boats, and that we would work on the rest of the overall boating regulation next month, starting at the GM meeting and then going to the work session and so forth. If you have concerns about houseboats or something of that nature, Director Over, I think, has similar concerns, and that's why he brought it up that way.
And Steve, just to clarify, the motion that I made is just, it specifically says developed for the regulation of wake boats. It's not about this entire document. It's just the addition of the wake boat regulation.
So which part of that is in this brochure?
So if you look at the one side where you see fishing and boating and water sports, and on the left-hand side, number 3. So it'll go from general regulation all the way down, not to include number 7. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 are direct copies of the regulation that the Rules and Regulations Committee put together. And I'd also like to point out that this regulation sheet, other than the changes for wake boats, was what we've had in place since last year. I think last year at this time, the Lakes Committee makes some recommendations on changes. So in other words, if you had some challenges, it was there last year. Not saying that it shouldn't be changed, but it was there last year also.
The houseboat was?
Yes.
Even though it violates policy?
So
What do you mean it violates policy?
Because in policy, it prohibits jet skis and permanently enclosed kitchens and bathrooms and sleeping quarters.
I think it prohibits the use of those, but this iteration has been the same for at least 7 years, and probably much before that. But like Tom said, it needs to be addressed and changed. We can certainly do that.
All right, so going back to the motion, it's under the boating rules and regulations, number 6?
Number 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Pertaining to the issue of wakes and wake boats. Any other comments? I'll call the motion then. Ruth said vote yes. All in favor of the regulation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? 1 opposed, 1 abstention. Okay.
Mary, please raise your hand on the abstention. Please raise your hand on the abstention. Thank you very much.
Mary abstains.
Next up on your board packet is page 171. At the last Community Involvement Committee, there was discussion about how over the last year to 2 years the committee has struggled to get volunteers. The POA has advertised multiple times in multiple ways to try and get additional volunteers. Unfortunately, we have been unsuccessful in getting additional volunteers. So the committee started discussing whether it made sense to disband the committee. Now, one thing on the bottom of page 171, you'll see the lasting legacy. 2 of the things that they created most recently and that are active are the charity coat drive, which was a huge success this last year, and the fireflies and tailgates. And so management has stated that we would take, if the committee gets disbanded, management will take over the operation, so those two valued events would continue. Also, the precursor for the Community Involvement Committee was the Young Residents Committee, and they were instrumental in the decision to renovate the playground equipment and the creation of the beach at Lake Avalon. So Bella Vista is indebted to the efforts of the Young Residents Committee and the Community Involvement Committee. They've done a lot of great work over the last few years. Unfortunately, they've been unsuccessful in getting people to volunteer for this committee. I'm sorry, one more thing. And we've spoken to each of the committee members and offered that we would do our best to if they want to continue to volunteer, to place them on potentially the rec committee or something of that nature to see if they would like to continue serving the community.
Someone make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I make a motion to disband the Community Involvement Committee effective immediately. Further, the Rules and Regulation Committee is directed to prepare modifications to the governing documents to remove the Community Involvement Committee.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
David Welchel seconds. Any discussion? Jerry?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion that we also include the super committee in the same process. It hasn't met. It doesn't seem like it's doing anything, so I just throw it out there that way.
You can amend it to add.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Yeah, I would second it, but could we put it in a separate amendment? Because it is a committee, existing committee, rather than attach it to disbanding this committee.
Jerry, would you make that as a separate motion? Would you agree to that? Or would you rather stick with the amendment?
Doug, which is the best way to handle it?
Yeah, I don't care either, Jerry.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. You're disbanding both of them, or I mean that's the intent, right? That you would that you would disband both of them. So I think it's perfectly
Okay,
a perfect option to add it
I'm
here.
fine with. I'll second that.
we have a
Second his
motion
amendment.
to amend from Jerry Hover. We have a second of that motion to amend from Jim. Jerry, you have something to say?
Just if the chair wants to make it separate, I'd be happy to make it separate. If we can handle it together, then let's do it.
Doug is fine with it being together.
Well, the only reason you would want, you can do it together, absolutely. The only reason you would potentially want to make it separate if a board member wants to disband one but not disband the other. If the board is in favor of disbanding both, that's totally fine. But a board member could want to just disband one and not the other.
But that's what the amendment does,
Yeah,
because you're voting on.
Have discussion on
Correct.
the amendment.
Amendment covers that.
Is there anybody who would object to amending? Yeah. Okay, then we will vote on the amendment to add the super committee. All in favor? Nobody opposed?
Just a comment regarding the Community Involvement Committee and the previous Residents Committee. Again, I personally thank them for their efforts in helping us spearhead the beach promotion and the playground revisions. And I think I saw informal evidence of a lot of that same group tonight in emails that the board received regarding support for them and their families, and the fact that some of them work in town and they'll be able to ride to work. I think I saw evidence of some of that in the emails that the board received, a lot of the Metfield younger family residents.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion as amended? I'll call for a vote then. All in favor of disbanding the super committee and the Community Involvement Committee and having rules and regulations direct and prepare the modifications for the board to get those out of the policies. All in favor? 9-0. If there's no other business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to read the announcement.
So moved.
David Welchel has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I will read the announcements before we adjourn, though, before I ask you to vote on that. Coffee and Questions is Tuesday, March 10th, 10 a.m. at Metfield Clubhouse. That's for new members, so if you know anybody, have a new neighbor or something, have them come on. Board of Directors GM meeting Thursday, March 12th, 4:30 p.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club. Meet the Candidates Night, Tuesday, March 17th, 6 p.m., Reardon Hall, right here. Board of Directors Work Session, Thursday, March 19th, 9 a.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club. Board of Directors Regular Session, Thursday, March 26th, 6 p.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club. All in favor of adjourning? It's adjourned. Thank you for hanging in there.